everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How's everything in your yard doing?
It's good. Things are changing a little bit, and it's fun. We've got some leaves are coming down.
You can tell the transition of the seasons.
Yep.
Upon us.
I've still got to do some lawn work. I still have to get my fertilizer down.
I do too.
And I still have to spray
We've been a little dry, so it borrowed me a little time because, of course, you need moisture in order to activate those granules. So it's been dry, but I'm going to get it on because I heard there's some rain in the forecast, so I need to get the lawn fertilizer on before the rain.
Okay, we'll keep an eye out for...
I think that's in the extended forecast as we speak.
Well, talking about things to do and things that we have been doing, you had an interesting little kind of, not necessarily a field trip, but you had an interesting visit last week, right?
We did. The NDSU Horticulture Research Farm, which is 40 miles west of Fargo, kind of in the Absaraka-Amenia area between a couple of small towns. The Horticulture Research Farm had its 50th anniversary of when it was first started. And now why would the Horticulture Research Farm, why would that be 40 miles west of campus? Wouldn't it be handier to have it right by Fargo or right outside Fargo? Well, when they developed that farm, they wanted an area that had a soil type more, kind of more like most of North Dakota. The Red River Valley has heavy clay soil.
Sure.
And that's not typical of the rest of North Dakota and really not typical of most of Minnesota out of the Red River Valley. So they wanted a research farm that was outside the Red River Valley. So the clay soil wouldn't dictate necessarily what could grow across the greater region. So that's why they developed this farm out there. And there's all kinds of good research that goes on out there. It's 80 acres, so it's a sizable patch. Yeah. And in the interior of that 80 acres is 40 acres of trees and shrubs in an arboretum.
Okay.
Named the Dale E. Herman Arboretum. Dale Herman was the one that started that. He was a professor at NDSU for probably 40-some years. And he's the one that started that arboretum. So an arboretum is a collection of trees and shrubs, and this is the largest collection of trees and shrubs between Minneapolis and the West Coast. And so it's large, it's fascinating. And of course, at that arboretum is where they test new developments of trees and shrubs to see. And now the arboretum, the whole research farm, is fenced because of deer.
Yeah.
And so it's not open to the public for just going out there and tour. But what you can do is watch for when there are announcements once a year in the kind of towards fall. They have a public field day. And so in the future, watch for that. It's interesting. There's big deer fence all the way around and a gate at the front entry. During the tour of a couple of years ago, of course, they left the main gate open. And sure enough, a deer came out of a shelter belt and got inside. And of course, a deer wandering through 80 acres.
That's a candy store.
Yeah, exactly. And hidden between all these big trees and shrubs. It took quite a bit of doing to get that out of there. So it didn't make candy.
Yeah.
So it didn't eat the candy that was inside that candy store. And so anyway, that's why even when workers are working inside the horticulture farm, the gate is always kept closed. But do watch in the future. It's a fascinating place. You wouldn't imagine, because it's all surrounded by farm fields. There's soybeans and there's corn and there's wheat and barley. And then you drive up to this and it's like heaven to a gardener. All the research going on, how the best garlic varieties, how to keep weeds out of gardens and planting, and of course the big, huge arboretum in which these wonderful tree selections are shown.
So speaking of being out there and the time of the year you were out there, any good colors out there?
Just starting.
Okay.
Just starting the fall color, and it's fascinating that when NDSU, the Woody Plants Improvement Program, and we had Dr. Todd West with that program, we had that on a past podcast, and one of the key features that they look at in developing trees, of course, winter hardiness and the shape and the form, but also fall color. if they can develop a tree that has wonderful fall color, that's an awesome bonus.
Yeah.
And there are some that that they've developed that just turn beautiful bright red in the fall of the year. And so when we were out there, some of the color was just starting. Thinking about.
Well, so I know that now I get updates on my phone. I see emails about the fall color, where the fall color is. There'll be various maps that will be popping up, kind of heat maps, where the color is getting intense, things like that. You don't necessarily have to drive too far to find fall color.
No,
you can find some in your own yard. Well, and you can kind of plan for that.
Exactly. But, you mentioned fall color in the fall color maps. It's fascinating how Mother Nature starts these fall colors, because you don't even need frost. We haven't had frost in at least the Fargo area and much of the region. We haven't even gotten close to frost yet, knock on wood. But Mother Nature is fascinating. So trees and shrubs are actually pretty smart. They sense the declining day length, the shortening days. They sense that, and that's a trigger to them that winter is going to be coming. And so we need to start kind of shutting down in preparation, shutting down, toughening up, hardening off in preparation for winter so we don't get freeze back. So these shortening days then, as trees and shrubs start to kind of wind down and slow their growth, the green chlorophyll in the leaf starts to dismantle and break down. And so as that green chlorophyll starts to disappear, it unmasks the yellow colors. So for any trees or shrubs that turn yellow in the fall, that's because of the green chlorophyll disappearing. And so we get some very beautiful, intense yellows and golds. And then further, some types of trees and shrubs have that beautiful red color. And that is in response to the cooler temperatures coming. So you got short days coming, reveals the yellows and golds. And then as temperatures start to cool, certain trees and shrub species with cool temperatures, they start to build up sugars and other compounds, kind of sap type things that concentrate in the leaves. And that's what gives us the bright oranges and coppers and red colors. So there's a lot of neat kind of chemistry going on within these trees.
I never knew that
give us this treat.
I never knew that there was two factors that go into that and that they don't necessarily happen at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. So isn't that fascinating? And so the best years for fall color, the best falls that will give us the most intensity of fall colors, are ones where we have bright sunny days and cooler temperatures. Because then the cooler temperatures help the sugars and stuff that make it nice and red. The falls that aren't quite as nice are if we have lots of clouds and rainy weather. Yeah. And then it just seems things are a little less intense.
Well, then also, too, if you have stormy weather, it tends to knock those leaves down.
Well, yeah, then it knocks all the leaves off. Yeah. Now, that brings up a good point, John, and that is, okay, why exactly do leaves fall off? And it's fascinating. In addition to the trees and shrubs knowing that it's time to slow growth, is what I'm trying to say, for fall, they develop, where the leaf attached to the twig, they develop a layer of cells called the abscission layer. And that layer is a breakaway layer, so that as that forms in response to shortening days, then the leaves will fall away. Mother Nature is pretty fascinating. Wouldn't that be something if winter would come and there was no breakaway layer? Those leaves would just be hanging on the tree all winter. And well, then next spring, when the new ones come, you'd have all the old stuff hanging on and it'd be kind of a mess. Yeah. So Mother Nature really has quite a system. Not only do we get color change, but the leaves drop away and in preparation already for next year's leaf out. So trees and shrubs are kind of magnificent creatures.
It's like they've been doing this for a while. They know what to do.
Exactly. Yeah, they know exactly. Good point. So that brings us up to the wonderful things on fall color.
Yeah.
And it is so fun in our landscapes to develop things that have wonderful color in our own yards. Oh, the other thing that is so wonderful about talking about fall color and how we can get more fall color in our own yards is this. Tulips. Okay, in the spring of the year, when we see in somebody's beautiful yard, these wonderful tulips blooming, I oftentimes I wish I had that. But in the spring, when you see those tulips blooming, it's not the time to plant tulips. Tulip bulbs aren't available then. They aren't available until the next fall. And you got to remember, I wanted tulips. Fall color is wonderful because when we see the fall color, we can plant. Fall is a wonderful time to plant. For example, when I see somebody's wonderful burning bush this time of year and say, gosh, I'd like to have one. Well, I can go to the garden center and buy one and plant one right now while it's fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't have to make a note to myself to do that sometime in the future. And when we talk about fall planting of these things, trees and shrubs will make good root growth until the soil drops to 40 degrees. So we've got pretty good time yet. So the goal is to try to get trees, shrubs, perennials planted by about October 1st. Okay. So we've got a window of opportunity here in which we can plant these things. So while we're thinking about and talking about these nice fall-colored trees and shrubs, we can actually go and buy them and plant them now. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go visit garden centers probably over the weekend here, and I'm going to do some buying and planting.
So what things would you look for? Let's start with trees. What?
Yeah.
I mean, because when you think of fall colors, you do think of trees.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And isn't that fascinating, too? When we think about autumn, when the word autumn comes to mind, not just pumpkin spice, but you think about fall color, don't you? Yeah. So, and of course, the trees are probably the most dramatic. So let's talk about some of the trees that would be best adapted to, of course, northern climates. But also, I'm going to limit them to ones that will do good in the soils across the whole region. Okay, because some trees and shrubs don't like the heavy Red River Valley soil. So we're going to limit to not only will these trees and shrubs do well in heavy soil, but they'll do well all across the region. Minnesota, South Dakota, Montana, North Dakota. So if we take a look at first larger scale trees, shade type trees, mm-hmm. Well, there's some beautiful birch. And of course, birch, when you drive across northern Minnesota, the yellows and the golds, just such vibrant yellows. So I'm going to concentrate on that color for a minute. And Dakota Pinnacle birch, which is developed at NDSU, a nice, fairly drought-resistant birch, wonderful yellow color. Another birch developed at NDSU, Prairie Dream birch, another wonderful, bright yellow. Dramatic fall color. And of course, one thing that makes fall color neat is all the color ranges put together. Mm-hmm. So, and of course, when you drive into Minnesota or some of the river valleys of North Dakota and see it's the color blends and tones. So now in my yard, I've got some birch. And I have yet to plant some of the red type colors, but I'm going to. So as we take a look at some of the reddish ones, well, first, let me tell you a couple of other bright yellow ones. There's Northern Tribute birch. That's a river birch. River birch have kind of a wonderful scaling bark. Okay. That wonderful kind of paper bark in a tannish color.
Yeah, and when you think of birch trees, it peels back. That usually
exactly.
Sometimes it'll start off as a white, and then it'll peel back.
Yep, and that kind of peeling type bark they call it exfoliating bark is the forestry term for it. And river birch is a wonderful. Instead of the white colors, it's kind of a beautiful tannish color or even coppery colored. Northern Acclaim honey locust, that's a very popular tree developed at NDSU, nice yellow fall color. And then if we want to intermingle those with some nice bright red, buckeye are a wonderful alternative to autumn blaze maple. I'm not going to suggest autumn blaze maple because in parts of the area, much of North Dakota, Red River Valley, much of the area, autumn blaze maple just doesn't like our soil.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to have to continually feed it with iron and baby it along, well, let's choose something that's not as finicky.
Yeah.
And one of those is the buckeye. NDSU has a wonderful buckeye developed called Prairie Torch, and it's a beautiful orange-red fall color. Lava burst buckeye. I love the name, lava burst.
That certainly tells you about the color.
Yes, that is orange-red. Tough as nails, hardy, well adapted to soil types across the region. Autumn Splendor Buckeye, which was developed by University of Minnesota. That's a great one with a nice reddish fall color. And an oak tree. That was developed that had a beautiful red fall color, developed at NDSU. Prairie Stature Oak, nice one. Prairie Expedition Elm has a nice, that again is back to the yellow fall color. Prairie Expedition Elm, wonderful large shade type tree. Now, sugar maples in the Minnesota area are just such vibrant colors. And NDSU has worked on a sugar maple that is better adapted to prairie type soils, and that one is called Northern Flare Sugar Maple. And the northern red oak is a great red one. Some of the poplars, poplars aren't going to last maybe 200 years. Most poplars have a 35 to 40-year range.
But they tend to grow fast, too,
They grow fast. And, of course, for a fast-growing screening-type tree or shade tree, and if we realize that it's maybe going to give us that enjoyment for 35 to 40 years, then we maybe need to replace it. But, gosh, they can grow. I'm not exaggerating. They can grow 6 feet a year, and so they give you something really quickly. Prairie Sky Poplar is one with a nice yellow. Hackberry, wonderful shade tree that has a nice light yellow color. Larch. Are you familiar with larch?
A little bit.
Larch trees are fascinating. They have a needle-like foliage with kind of a pyramidal shape. They look almost like a spruce or pine evergreen. During the growing season, they look almost identical. And then in the fall of the year, the needle-like foliage turns a beautiful golden yellow, and then it falls off. And so it's a fascinating tree. Such a nice shape, wonderful fall color. And of course, our evergreens are evergreen. They don't give us fall color, but that's okay. They give us a green. And let's see, another maple kind of in that autumn blaze category is one called Firefall. They're called Freeman maples. A gentleman by the name of Freeman, last name, developed these hybrids. But again, they're not widespread adapted the way some of the others are. And so then after we look at those large shade type trees, we would get into smaller scale trees. Those that don't get quite as large, these would be trees that are lower headed. Canopy is lower, so they're good for screening or maybe for smaller yards, decorative type trees. Oh, and in that group is the Amur maple, A-M-U-R, Amur maple.
Okay.
Wonderful, winter hardy, well adapted. They get a beautiful flame red color in the fall of the year. So that was the Amur maple. There's an alder. Developed at NDSU, Prairie Horizon alder. That has a beautiful yellow color. And a euonymus. Now, euonymus, there's several different types of euonymus. Some are more shrub-like. We'll talk about that in a minute. But there's one called Prairie Radiance euonymus, and that's more like a smaller tree. Beautiful red fall color. Quaking aspen is a nice yellow fall color. I love the rustling of the leaves of quaking aspen, a nice small decorative type tree, good for screening. And Canada red cherry, which is our main purple leaf. During the growing season, it's a purple leaf. Purple leaf. It's got the same fruit as the natural choke cherry. The birds always get it quicker on ours. But anyway, the Canada red cherry, which is purple leaf all growing season, but that develops a really nice red mix in the fall of the year before the leaves do drop off. Juneberry. Wonderful fruit, but also, and of course, Juneberry, you got to put netting over for the birds because they love the berries. But in the fall of the year, they get a beautiful golden scarlet color. And here's one of my favorite for a smaller stature tree, and that's called Hot Wings Tatarian Maple. Hot Wings Tatarian Maple.
Tell me about that.
It is absolutely beautiful. The hot wings comes from the seed pods of maples look like wings.
Oh.
Yeah. And this particular variety, those seed pods, those kind of wings, most all maples kind of have that shape. Sometimes they're kind of nicknamed helicopters or different things. But anyway, these on this particular tree, the hot-winged Statirian maple, those seed pods are a bright scarlet color. So when they're forming the seed pods during the summer, it looks like it's blooming. But actually, those are bright seed pods. Well, in the fall of the year, in addition to those, you get a beautiful red scarlet leaf color as well. And so that gives us, those are some pretty good lists in order to give us some fall color. So there should be something for everybody in that mix.
Yeah, something from the big shade trees to some smaller trees for smaller spaces maybe.
Right.
It's a good rundown. Let's take a quick little break. When we come back, let's talk about some shrubs that you can get to add a little color to your yard.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
All right, we're back. We're talking about planting for fall color in your yard, how to get some of those nice pops of color from those golds, some of those reds, some of those oranges. And we talked about some trees, but now we're going to talk about a little bit about some shrubs.
Oh yeah, and shrubs in our landscape, there's some that just get such wonderful pops of color. And why not? Why not plant a shrub that looks good all during the growing season and then gives us the fall color? So I mentioned Amur maple in these small trees.
Yeah.
Well, Amur maple is kind of flexible. It can be also grown as a shrub, a large shrub, but if it's grown as kind of a multi-type shrub instead of more like a single trunk, it becomes a landscape shrub, a large one. But anyway, there's one called Fireworks Amur maple that's a good kind of shrub type. And the barberries.
Yeah.
Now, barberries, I love barberries. I don't like their thorns.
They are prickly to work with.
I don't like to prune barberry, but I mean, they're, sometimes you put up with a few things to get their beauty. Well, the barberries, a lot of those just become beautiful, wonderful in the fall of the year. There's one called Carousel, especially, that turns beautiful red in the fall. Rosy Glow Barberry, nice mix of purples and reds. So barberries, check those out. There's lots of different cultivars in the garden centers, and most do develop a really nice fall color.
And barberries, for the most part, they're not going to spread so wildly. Right. They'll kind of maintain a shape. Like you said, you may want to prune them up a little bit, especially because they can, if you're running by it, you can get caught on their barbs, hence the name. But they really do add a lot of color, and kind of like even within their leaves, they can be multiple different hues in there. They really are a spectacular shrub.
John, I never put that together, that barberry and barbs. That immediately caught my...
It could have been it could be something else.
Caught my ear as you're mentioning it. Yeah. Yes, but I always think barberry thorns. I don't know if they're technically
barbs or on their
it sounds great to me. Yeah. But that's fascinating.
It's a way to remember it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, with the barbs. Yeah, that's awesome. And of course, burning bush, the euonymus burning bush. Such a wonderful, just an intense. They can have kind of a pinkish red, just eye-catching from quite a distance.
Kind of depends on how much sun it gets, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point, because sometimes fall color will depend on the sun it gets. If they're in too much of a shady spot, the color intensity probably wouldn't be quite as great. And of course, the euonymus burning bush are beloved to rabbits.
Yes.
And so they will come from miles around to eat your euonymus. So a person does recommend circling chicken wire around, and even with age, it's a good idea to protect them. But man, it's worth it.
Yeah.
But because they will find even an established one, they will find and gnaw the bark in the wintertime. And they can ruin even an older one. We
put one in a couple years ago, and our yard, you've been over, where we have it gets a little bit more shade. Over at Concordia, like half a block away, they've got one that's out in full sun. Theirs are very bright red, and ours are a little bit more muted, but still nice color. And then we do have to figure out the time when we notice that the rabbits are going to be out. And one year they did, they chewed it back pretty well, but it's rebounded. So it's nice. So it is there's some work that goes with it, but it's worth it.
And, you mentioned a key thing when the rabbits find it. When they've got lots of other vegetation around, when things are green, when the clover in the lawn, they nibble away. And they've got other things, they've got my lilies to eat during the growing season. Right. But when all of that greenery disappears, then they go shopping. And euonymus, they can smell that from miles around. So I need to buy another euonymus because I wasn't quite so fortunate. They totally ate mine down to the root system a few years ago. And so there wasn't enough left for it to come back. So anyway, I'm going to get another one and I'm going to take my own advice and protect it better. So if we move on to the viburnum group, the viburnums, high bush cranberry is a viburnum. There's a number of different cultivars you find at the garden center, and they have just vivid fall color. Now, the viburnums, there are short ones, there are big, tall ones. So there's something there for almost any landscape, but check the height and the width so it'll fit into the area that you want. And of course, sumac. Yeah. Boy, sumac, the fall color.
Yeah. Lakes area, you talk fall color, and you driving around the fields.
Driving along the fields, the ditches, and you see that's one of the earliest signs sometimes, isn't it? Sometimes they color up very early, stress, drought. Sometimes that'll bring on early. I've noticed on the sumac too. Now, sumac, this can be good, can be not so good. They like to sucker. So if you've got an area that you kind of like to fill with something a little more massive, sumac is wonderful. One of the newer cultivars is tiger eye sumac, which has a nice kind of lemony green, light green foliage, so it's a dramatic contrast during the growing season. It does like to sucker, so it sends up shoots, but wow, then it gets a vivid orange in the fall of the year.
Is that the one that I've seen that some people have kind of trained it into almost like a tree? Like a small tree?
Almost like a bonsai type tree.
So it'll get up to maybe about 4 feet, maybe 5 feet. It'll spread about the same.
In time, it can get even a little higher than that. But yes, sometimes it will lose or it can prune it away, some of the lower branches. And so it can almost become almost like a tropical or a Japanese garden looking plant. And they have a kind of a finely dissected leaf a little bit, kind of a lacy type look. So anyway, tiger eye sumac and the other types of sumac are wonderful additions to the fall color. And gooseberry, that will give some good fall color as well. Dogwoods for the shade. Dogwoods, the leaves turn of beautiful kind of a purplish red. And cotoneaster, which is probably the most common formal hedge. The sheared hedges, many of those are cotoneaster. That develops a really nice purplish red as well.
And dogwoods, I just want to say too, a lot of them, some of the varieties, there's actually one called red twig dogwood. The stems, the branches on the dogwood, they can turn a little bit of color, which is a really nice, not only fall, but as the leaves fall off and into winter, it really does add a nice little accent.
I love that about the dogwoods because, wow, against the twigs against the white snow. Yeah. I've got a variety. I bought at Garden Center. The variety is called Baton Rouge.
Yep, it's a popular one.
Really nice, just a vibrant red against the snow. So even when the leaves are gone. And the nine barks. There's one of my favorites is called Amber Jubilee nine bark. It was named after Queen Elizabeth's one of her jubilees, Amber Jubilee. It's got a beautiful coppery green leaf color during the growing season. And then in the fall, it develops even more intensity of a copper color. So nine barks are great. A great choice.
And do you talked a little bit when we were talking about the berries, do you ever go out, drive around the fields and look for places too? I know some people will harvest some kind of fall color berries and things like that for wreaths and things like that.
Yes, bittersweet.
Bittersweet is a big one.
Bittersweet is a big one. No, I haven't. I haven't. That'd be fun on a nice. And of course, a person would want to get permission from landowners and kind of know where it is you're on. But yeah, that would be fun. I'm sure you've too seen wreaths made of these vines, bittersweet.
I think the
grapevine, even milkweed pods.
Milkweed pods.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, the dried type.
Well, let's take another quick little break. When we come back, we'll talk about some colorful perennials.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back. We're talking about fall color in your yard. We went over trees and shrubs, but now let's talk about perennials. What can we do for, we talked about the bigger things kind of. What can we do for some of the smaller plants in the yard?
There's good color in fall perennials. Now, the fall perennial that probably comes to mind most is the chrysanthemum.
Yes.
Now, when I was a young boy kind of studying horticulture, I often wondered, is a mum and a chrysanthemum, is that the same thing or are they two different things? Well, mum is simply short for chrysanthemum, same thing. So now all of the potted mums that you see sold this time of year, are those winter hardy? Can we plant those? Well, there's a lot of different cultivars of mums that you see potted up. And now there are some mums with increased winter hardiness. For example, University of Minnesota started a mum breeding program, I think, 100 years ago. And so University of Minnesota developed some mums, chrysanthemums, that are more winter hardy than others. To date, the mums are going to be a little bit borderline in winter hardiness. Okay, so they're going to like mulch in the fall of the year before freeze up or around freeze up. And they want the tops left on over winter, and that helps catch snow, and they just survive better. So now in this group of mums that have better winter hardiness, there's the Min series, University of Minnesota.
Oh, Minn.
Yeah, Minn.
Okay.
So there's Min Autumn, Min Yellow, Min Ruby, Min Red, Min White. And so that is that series that if you want mums that are perennial, coming back each year, blooming in the fall, check out the Min series at garden centers. Another great one developed by University of Minnesota is the Mammoth Mum series, Mammoth Mums. And of course, again, there's different colors in that. Now, there's a key to these. You plant those in the spring of the year. So visit your local garden center for the mums that have winter hardy, the Min series and the Mammoth series, and plant them in the spring of the year. They need the whole growing season in order to develop enough structure to survive winter. And they will bloom that first year beautifully. And then in the fall of the year, leave the tops on after frost, give them some winter protection, some mulch, and cross your fingers. Then next spring, you'll see them pop up at ground level and then bloom the following. But they do need that extra care, and you do need to start with those varieties that are more winter hardy. The time to plant a mum and hope that it's going to be perennial and come back is not in the fall of the year. Now, these big ones that we buy and decorate our doorsteps with, these big mums, you don't have anything to lose by trying planting them out, Plant them out and see if they'll come back. They might. Yeah. I've heard of gardeners where that has worked. It's not as reliable as the types that I mentioned before. And so anyway, that's kind of a long spiel on mums.
Well, mums are so nice too because they really keep this, it's kind of compact, but it's a really tight form, right?
It is.
It's a really nice dome.
Yeah, they've got such wonderful, and I believe that's one of the descriptive terms when you read about the different mums is that dome-shaped.
Yeah.
And wonderful plants.
Have you ever heard of mums called daisies? Or
Yes.
are they the same family, or are they?
Yeah, they are a kind of a class of mums.
Okay.
The daisy type mum, that's descriptive of the flower shape, an open flower shape with a yellow center.
Okay.
Those types are called the daisy type of mums. And in fact, the mammoth mums, when you read the description, in addition to being the mound shaped, the dome shaped, they're also described as having the daisy type of flower. So the daisy type flowers, as I mentioned, have the petals on the outside and the center is yellow, kind of like your typical daisy type flower.
I saw that in a store and I was a little confused. So thank you for,
Yeah, so
appreciate
that describes the flower class. Okay, so if we pass along from mums, another beautiful one that has great winter hardiness, a perennial, is called purple dome aster. And of course, the dome kind of describes the shape. Purple dome aster is absolutely phenomenal. That will bloom long after frost, way into November, and it has, as the name implies, just a rich purple. This is the type of thing when you see it blooming in October, people will ask, wow, what is that? Purple dome aster does not bloom during the growing season, but begins blooming in the fall. And of course, that's part of the beauty of a perennial flower garden. They're continually changing.
Yep.
You got the tulips blooming in the early spring, then you got the peonies, you got iris, phlox and lilies, daylilies in the middle of summer, and then no reason to have that run out in the fall of the year. You plant things like purple dome aster that come into their glory late in the season. Another one of those is the tall sedum. Now, our sedum are just starting to color up. One that's very commonly sold is one called Autumn Joy sedum, and they get maybe 18 inches, 16, 18 inches tall and covered. The top is just covered with this dome and they vary from kind of a pinkish tone to more of a reddish. They're different cultivars. And so the tall sedum are just wonderful. They have that kind of a succulent type of leaf. Yeah, wonderful plants. Russian sage.
Yeah.
With its blue kind of lacy type flowers. The older Russian sage, I wasn't a fan of because it was a little more open, kind of woody, a little scraggly. But the newer varieties of that are awesome. I think there's one called denim lace and a few others.
I think Russian sage are particularly good if you have an area that maybe wants to stay dry, right? Or
yes.
that does. If you
drought
have things
resistant.
Around it, drought resistant.
Yeah,
They are really good for hot areas.
Dry,
yeah,
hot, dry, droughty type areas. If you had a spot that gets intense south sun, the cultivars of Russian sage and the plant breeders have been so prolific. So you will find named varieties of Russian sage, like the denim one that I mentioned, and another one that needs when this plant was named. It should have had a new marketing advisor because it's called Joe Pye weed.
Oh, right.
Okay, well, do we really want to plant something that's got weed in it?
Right.
Okay, so I like to call it Joe Pye. Usually that's hyphenated Joe and then Pye, Joe Pye. And there's a couple of different cultivars. That can get quite tall. The normal straight Joe Pye will get 6 feet tall. Kind of big and massive, and that blooms in late summer and into fall. There is a more dwarf cultivar of that. That still gets probably around 4 feet at least, but at least it's smaller. And so that's a great one. Ornamental grasses really come into their glory once they send up the seed stalk.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the fall of the year, the seed stalk waving in the wind. And of course, that'll cling on all winter, giving winter interest too. And then the grasses will, as we get frost, they'll develop their nice golden color as well to not just the seed head, but also the leaves themselves, and so many different types.
Yeah.
I've got a cultivar of big blue stem that develops kind of a reddish. The foliage turns kind of a reddish in the fall of the year. So fascinating. And, of course, Carl Forrester is the ornamental grass that's planted in front of every bank and dentist office.
For a reason.
For a reason. Because
they are durable.
They are. And in kind of some mass plantings,
Yep.
I've seen rows of those that are actually very attractive.
I like them.
I do too.
They're not flashy and they don't, but they serve a purpose.
They really, really do. Oh, and just a sideline on those. Each spring, they need to be cut back to right above ground level. Otherwise, you have a whole haystack of old stuff that the new has to grow through. So all of the ornamental grasses should be leave the foliage on over winter because it's really attractive, and then cut back in early spring before the new growth starts coming out of the base. Turtlehead, Chelone, Chelone, Chelone. Turtlehead is a nice fall blooming perennial. Helenium. I enjoy the common name of that one, sneezewort. I'm not sure why it's called sneezewort, but helenium or helenium. That's got warm colors of kind of deep bronze colors. That's a nice low-growing one. And then, of course, we can't leave without mentioning the panicle type of hydrangeas.
Yeah.
They aren't a perennial flower that dies back to, the true perennial flowers die back to ground level, then come back the next spring. Of course, the panicle type hydrangeas with the big pyramidal cone-shaped flowers, they're a shrub, woody shrub. But they kind of act like a perennial flower because they bloom so much.
Yeah.
And, of course, in the fall of the year, depending on the type, many of the types of the panicle type hydrangeas have an interesting change in their flower color. They will go from kind of a whitish and then to a pinkish, and then some of the varieties will develop a reddish burgundy fall color to the flower. And, of course, the foliage is attractive too. And last, I'd maybe mention roses. Many of the shrub type of roses will have a flush of bloom in the fall of the year. A number of ours, Morden Blush, Morden, temporary mental loss. The Morden series is great. Morden Blush, Morden Sunrise is blooming now in the fall again. And Morden Bell. That was the beautiful deep pink one I was trying to remember. And so many of the hardy shrub roses will have fall-type blooms. And so that's kind of fun. Last year, with our extended fall, we still had roses blooming in November.
Wow.
And so it was, they'll take a little bit of light frost on the blossoms. And as a side note, roses should really not be cut back in the fall of the year. Do that pruning next April. That's a little bonus information beyond the. But I always think of these when I'm looking at our own roses. I'm thinking, well, some of them should I do a little pruning now in the fall to save myself some winter work? But I tell some spring work. But I tell myself no, because that opens the wounds up to increased chance of winter dieback. So leave the hips on. Many of those shrub type roses, when we're talking fall color, they develop some beautiful rosy red or coppery red rose hips, which is the seed pod, and it's fine to leave those on. That has actually been shown to help the rose bush to harden off.
Really?
So not only does that help it toughen in and harden up for wintertime, but they're also quite attractive, the rose hips.
Leaves a little nice color there.
It does. But gosh, this is fun talking about fall color. Now I've got kind of the itch to actually have fall progress a little bit so I can start seeing some of these fall colors.
Well, now that since you're going to be going out this weekend and going to stores and looking around, what you're going to have, you're primed. You're going to have a lot on your mind and a lot on your shopping list, I bet.
Yep, and as long as I've got some spots to fill, why not do some things that give us some fall color as well?
And like you said, where we are now in the early part of September, weather's been great. 10-day forecast looks great. Great time to get out and plant.
It really is.
Well, Don, if people have questions about fall color or anything in their yard, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, @ndsu.edu. And feel free to send photos along with that of either successes or questions you have.
All right. Well, Don, thanks a lot for coming in.
Yeah, and thank you, John. Always great to be here. And have a good week, everyone.